We'll go to the phones where our good friend Nate Olson joins us, co-host of the Friday Football Scoreboard show, along with Rex Nelson. You can hear it on this very station at 10 o'clock Friday night. Nate, I know it's busy times these days. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Well, excited about what's coming up on Saturday. You know, I think a lot of us have just some nerves over the election tonight. Definitely not your usual Tuesday, right?
No, it's not. And I just pray that no matter what happens, that Mitch Albom, a former, I guess he is still currently a sports writer, sports columnist, one of my favorites, and you remember him from the Sports Reporters, I know. He wrote a great column today saying, regardless of what happens, the country needs to do better. And I agree with that. No matter whoever you're voting for, we need to keep it civil. And I think that's a good notion and sentiment to live by, and I encourage you to read the column. It's very good.
Yeah, Mitch Albom's very good. I agree with you there. All right, a couple games to recap here before we take a look at what's happening later on this Friday night. This victory for Rogers over Springdale Harbor, 49-42. Tell us what happened in that one and what it means for the 7A West.
Well, it was a shootout, but, it came down to defense. Marion Slater, big defensive lineman for Rogers, he gets 2 tackles behind the line of scrimmage, a tackle for loss on 3rd down, and then on 4th down, a sack along with Damon Volk. They stopped Harbor on downs late in the ball game to preserve the win. So big defensive stop for the Mounties, and Marion Slater doing a good job getting some penetration on the last 2 plays of that series. Rogers piled up 500 yards of offense. They're a surprise team to me. 5-2, much improved. And Harbor kind of took a little bit of a step back from what I thought they were going to do. Thought they would probably compete for that second spot behind Bentonville, and that's not going to happen. But Rogers does a good job of coming back from COVID and has a nice quality win over Harbor, and trying to get a home playoff game, which would be really big for them. The other game that was really big was Boonville Paris. This probably was the game of the century in Paris. The biggest game there since the 60s, and I think 1960 around that time they were I think we talked about last week, they were 8-0, and that's the last time that happened. And unfortunately for them, they didn't win. Boonville wins 28-20, 4th consecutive conference title. The Bearcats, one of the great football traditions in Arkansas. They go to Warren on a win this year during COVID and lose. Go to Stigler, Oklahoma on a win with COVID and lose. But otherwise, they've been lights out. And they stop Paris deep in their territory around the 11-yard line as Paris is trying to score that 6 points and maybe get the 2-point conversion to tie it late in the game with less than a minute. They come up big. Paris has scored numerous touchdowns on defense this year. Duke Walker returns 2 fumbles for touchdowns, so their offense is a little bit stymied by Boonville, but they come up with a pair of turnovers for touchdowns and kept it close. I think, obviously, Boonville is a pick to go deep in the playoffs, but I think Paris is too. We've talked before about their offense and the big play capabilities they have with Walker, who's a running back as well, a couple of good receivers and their quarterbacks. So look for both of those teams to have a chance. And Boonville, you can't say enough about them. They just win these big games, and this was at Paris, so huge win for them.
Let's look at the 4A1. Shiloh clinches that conference with a win over Huntsville, and they've never lost to Huntsville, so maybe they already have clinched it. And another big one between Prairie Grove and Elkins. What do you see in that one?
Well, in both of those teams were pretty competitive with Shiloh Christian, and Elkins had them on the ropes, I think you could say. Up a couple touchdowns at the half, and Shiloh responds with the running game that we talked about. So Elkins is very good defensively. I'd give them the edge in this game, but they're also a little banged up. I think it's going to kind of come down to Kane Johnson, their running back. He's very, very good. He's only played in the fourth quarter in 3 games this year because they've beaten teams so badly. So he's going to have to play this one, probably the duration probably. But Prairie Grove is good defensively too. This is going to be a nip and tuck game. Elkin's a little banged up. I still give them the edge, but it should be close. Whoever wins this is the number 2 seed in that league. And again, I think Elkin, if Prairie Grove wins this, I mean, maybe you put them in the conversation. I feel good about Elkins making a deep run. One of those teams that could make a run that's not a conference champion, a quality team, and they get healthy.
Speaking to Nate Olson here on Halftime, they got their final week of high school football starting this coming Friday, getting ready for the playoffs, and a lot of teams going to be solidifying their spots in the playoffs or different things. And you listed 5 big games that are happening, and they are some of the biggest ones here in the state. Let's start off with Harbor at Fayetteville. That's going to be a good one coming out of the 7A.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. We talked about Harbor kind of faltering a little bit, and Fayetteville is going the other direction. They've won 3 of their past 4. They got over that COVID hump. They've got some big play receivers. Casey Dick, the former Razorbacks, he does run that a high-octane offense, and they found their groove a little bit. I think this is a team, if they win, this is probably going to be a close game. Some have it picked around a 1-point margin. The people that pick those games, I would tend to agree with that, maybe Fayetteville by a little bit more. But if they win, that's a really good feather in their cap going into the playoffs. I think this is a team that got hit with a really tough non-conference schedule, and then with COVID, and it all just sort of snowballed on them. I think they're a lot better team than what they showed in league play, and I think their turnaround could continue Friday night and lead to a playoff, a little bit of a run. They get healthy, the offense is clicking, so it's a big game for them. I think they could get a home playoff game as well. Harbor trying to kind of get back in it a little bit. That stung losing to Rogers. I think they don't. Yeah. I don't think they thought they were going to lose that game. I don't think many people did. So they have to come back and play well in this to have any notion of a playoff, making an impact in the playoffs. So big game at Fayetteville, and I think they've got the advantage and the momentum right now.
Got another pair of big games here, and one that I've been hanging out with Mr. Dustin Smith over at Greenwood High School, been announcing some games over there, and I've been trying to keep in touch with what's happening to Greenwood this season, and obviously they've had a great season so far. Greenwood traveling to Lake Hamilton to wrap up the regular season. That's going to be a great matchup. And then I think the one that'll be just intriguing just because they're in the same town, Bentonville West versus Bentonville. You ain't going to get much better of a rivalry game there than Bentonville West versus Bentonville.
No, that you're right about that. Well, Lake Hamilton is looking for their first league championship since 2011. They're trying to win their first game against Greenwood after 4 losses. The good news for them, they're playing at home. That's a great advantage, and they're coming off a really good win at Benton. I'm kind of undervalued. I love Tommy Giller, and I've known him a long time. He's a great guy, one of the great role models, not just coach, but Christian guy, role model. He has rebuilt this program, but I've kind of undervalued them. I wasn't completely sold on them as a state championship contender. I still tended to think that Benton would have, a notch up over them even after a shaky start. Like Hamilton, all they've done is win every week, and they've won some close games and they won some blowouts. Owen Miller has run for over 1,000 yards. Tevin Woodley has run for over 1,000 yards. They've got a good defense. The last 4 or 5 games has only given up 20 points a game. But Greenwood, they have done so well this year, even with the new coach and losing Rick Jones. It's hard to bet against them, and they've played some really good football, taking on bigger schools with COVID, and so it's going to be a tough task for Lake Hamilton. I think what they're going to have to do, whenever you play a team that can throw the ball like they can and score points, they've got a good running back and a good quarterback. So they're multidimensional. They're going to have to hang on to the ball and run it well with that big line that they have and control the clock, control time possession, because if they get behind, they don't have a great way to get back in. If their passing game is not as good as the running game. So they really need to get the lead early and conserve clock and run it down on them, but that'll be easier said than done. Bentonville would be a heavy favorite in this game. Sometimes in rivalry games, you can throw that out the window. Bentonville West thought they were going to be a little bit better than they have been. They're still going to have a chance to take that second spot, though. They've played well at times this year. Bentonville, looking for their fifth straight championship, hasn't been close this year in the league. They are scoring 54 points a game in the league. Just really overwhelming opponents. It's probably going to be that way again. The one bad thing about Bentonville is, they haven't been pushed since September. And I know that Coach Grant would love to be pushed because you're going to be pushed in the playoffs. And, last year against North Little Rock, they're looking at probably having to maybe play North Little Rock again this year if things shake out the way we think they will. That's not easy, even playing them at home. So they would love to have a game that would be a little closer. I don't see it probably Friday night. It will be fun, though. Two teams in the same town. And Bentonville West has nothing to lose. I mean, if they play well enough, they could make it a game. They just have to play their best game of the season. I don't think they've done that yet. To play, all four quarters. If they can do that against Bentonville, they could keep it tight.
I think when you look at this whole season, we've talked about this prior to the high school season getting started, and you started seeing the cancellations or anything. I realized too that we pretty much have another like a second regular season starting with the playoffs starting next week. But it's got to give a kudos though that we're able to make it this far in the high school season and keep this high school season, the Arkansas high school football season, up and running throughout the whole year. And obviously there was hiccups with COVID cases and canceled games and different things like that. But the fact that we saw the end, I think it's a kudos to the state of Arkansas and the AAA.
Oh, I agree with it. Every coach, every administrator, the AAA, everybody has worked their behind off to make sure that kids can play football. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, we on the Scoreboard show, everybody that calls in, Rex and I, we're all for the kids. We love the kids. The best part about high school football is the players and the students that participate, the band, the cheerleaders. That's what it's all about. And you're never going to get this year back, guys. If you play whatever sport you play and it's canceled, you don't get it back. You don't get to. I would love to be able to go back and play high school sports again. You can't do it. And so it has been so great to see that the AAA has basically said, play whoever you want, wherever you want to, whenever you want to do it, because we want you to get the games in. They've been over backwards. Schools have come together. We've seen Paris play Hector at 11 o'clock. They made the game at 11 o'clock on a Friday. Boonville and Warren, who've played many times before in big games, they decided Thursday night at 5 o'clock, the day before a game, to play. So it's been great. And you just cross your fingers and say your prayers that the playoffs can go off, because it could be disastrous if cancellations occur in the playoffs. We've gotten this far, like you said. It's been fairly painless. There's been some cancellations, but you just hope that a great team somehow doesn't get excluded because of this. But one of the things they're going to do is they're not going to make the brackets until Saturday. They're going to let everybody in. And anybody that wants to play is going to be able to play. They're going to find that all out and shake it out on Saturday. If you want in or not, you can opt out. And they'll come up with the brackets, and they're going to try to play the games. And with any luck, we'll be playing championship games. I think it's the second week of December at War Memorial. It'll be the second and third week this year.
Opt-in playoffs. That's something I'd never heard of before. But then again,
it has been
2020.
Well, whenever you're doing the universal DH and runners on second base,
that's right.
In extra innings still. That's been the one thing as a sports fan. There's things that are happening this year that will never happen again, hopefully, and that's one of them. But yeah, that's why normally it's a big night Friday, because we're formulating the brackets and we're sitting there with our abacus, coming up with point differentials and all that stuff. Well, we won't have to worry about that Friday night, and we will talk a little bit about playoffs and implications, but we won't know if you don't know who's in it. You can't do the brackets, so we won't be filling in brackets too much on Friday evening. We'll have to, the next week we'll go over the results and we'll know who's in, but we won't know Friday night when we go off the air who's in or not.
And that's something. Nate, appreciate your time, man.
Thanks,
Thanks
Nate.
a lot. Have a good show Friday and enjoy the games.